Now, for a special quick hits video edition, we all had the opportunity to see something special, but I'm going to introduce us just real quick for those who may be tuning in. This is the Pop-O-Holics. Welcome. We talk about all things pop culture, lots of nerdy things, video games, movies, what have you. And my name is Christian. I'm the host, and I'm joined by my two best friends,
Chris Conkling
and Brian Dupree.
Now, you can listen to the full weekly upload episode by following the description of the YouTube video and subscribing on your podcatcher of choice. There we do the full audio feed where we do news for the week. We do what we've been consuming in the world of pop culture. And then we have some community feedback. But we're doing something special. We're going to be on YouTube for this portion where we talk about something very special that we all got to do, which is very rare. We don't live very close to each other at this point in our lives. But we are within a day's drive where we can all meet up and do something cool. And we saw the Final Fantasy VII Remake Orchestra World Tour, which is currently still happening. So you can go to their website, which we'll link in the show notes in the video description, to book tickets. This is not a paid promotion or anything about that. In fact, we paid lots of money to go see this. And we're going to tell you if it's worth it or not and what our thoughts were. So we're excited to do that. So what's really cool about our panel we got here with all of us is that I'm a singer-songwriter, musician under the name Midnight Satire. Shameless plug there. But I'm also a huge Final Fantasy fan. I've played tons of them. I played the early ones. I've played 7, 8, 9, Final Fantasy X. Played it all. Played the remake. Loved it. And also know music theory as well as music. Musician myself, not at the level that we're going to talk about with these composers and players, but nonetheless. And Chris is a Final Fantasy VII Remake fan, Final Fantasy VII fan, not overall.
Let's say Final Fantasy VII fan.
Oh, that's right. You have some issues.
He's a Final Fantasy VII Remake player, at least.
True.
I am indeed. I have played the game.
And he really likes the band. What is that one band that I always reference for you? I know it's not actually your favorite band, but the pop punk band. What the hell is their name? I can't remember now. Anyway, Fall Out Boy.
No idea what you're talking about.
Fall Out Boy, and there's another one.
Oh, Fall Out Boy.
Yeah, but the other one. Anyway, neither here nor there. You know the one I'm talking about. Clearly.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone
if you say so.
And then Brian, a big fan of music, actually a singer-songwriter in his own right, hip-hop artist under the name Who Knows. I know I'm not supposed to actually reveal your identity, but it's Who Knows, so check it out. It's on Apple Music.
Chris revealed his former Batman life on last episode, so tonight's a night for revelation.
Revelations.
This is very true. And Brian's a big fan, but never I think back in the day you played like 8. Right. I think that might be
a bit of 8, and probably the one that I played most was 10. Never beat it, but I played a decent bit.
But a huge fan of live events. You go to more concerts and entertainment events than either of us. So you're just a fan of like live music and live events. So a good spectrum here to give you a well-rounded idea of what there is respect. We also took my fiance, who loves music and live music and stuff, but doesn't have a whole lot of interest in especially Japanese RPGs. Or Japanese music, specifically.
She's the biggest fan out of all of us.
She's a bit bougie, so she's like, this is my first time going to an orchestra performance, and she was like, I used to go to the orchestra all the time as a kid, and I was like, oh, okay. So she had a little bit of that background.
Too.
So before we begin, I just want to explain a little bit about what this is. So Final Fantasy VII Remake, obviously the remake of a game made in 1997, Final Fantasy VII. This is the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is not a remaster of any sorts. It's actually a reimagining and of the first.
We've reviewed this game.
We've reviewed it, so you can check that episode out if you're interested in like our thoughts on the game. Me and Chris talked about it with our friend Marcus. And they did the whole music too for it, which was really cool. And it was arranged and composed, most of the music, by Nobu Uematsu. And this concert series is directed by Arnie Roth, who is the traveling composer who goes town to town selling his wares. No, he comes into town to the local or the state or even sometimes, I believe, the National Philharmonic, and basically reviews the music and helps that orchestra play the Final Fantasy VII Remake, some selections from the Final Fantasy VII Remake soundtrack, which is very good. I think me and Chris definitely, that was one of my favorite parts of playing the game. So they do have upcoming tour dates that you can see and they play some of this music live while they have like some gameplay and some of the video stuff happening, but more on that later. So just first off, I want to get your overall thoughts on this event and what it was like to go to it, and kind of your experience. Brian, you being kind of maybe the freshest one to this story, this specific music, this specific game, what were your overall thoughts of the Final Fantasy VII Remake Tour?
So I'll start off saying that I appreciated it was not a fully packed house, but there were a lot of people at this event, and the Dr. Phillips Center ended up announcing kind of a bit later down the line that they would be requiring either vaccination status or negative COVID tests. So that was an immediate positive for me about feeling comfortable going to this thing.
For me as well.
And they postponed it a lot. And
I didn't realize
this is in partnership. Square Enix is in collaboration with Arnie Roth and this other entertainment company, collaborate to kind of put this together, because obviously there's a lot of moving parts, and obviously like they're very cautious with current COVID protocols and stuff, and this has been delayed for over a year at this point.
Oh wow. So I definitely appreciated that. Our seats, Christian spontaneously bought us incredible orchestra center seats. I, not on purpose, misled some people that were supposed to sit next to me. If you guys are watching, fans of the show, I sincerely apologize. It was an honest mistake, but they never came back. And then I had
They were
free
like,
seats.
I recognized that's Brian from Pop-O-Holics. I just wanted to sit next to him, and he was such a dick to me. He said that the seat number wasn't the seat number I had on my ticket. I cannot believe that guy.
I know how much they paid for these tickets, so I felt just terribly bad. They still sat in our row. But yeah.
To be fair, one thing, and I'm glad you were at the show, glad you're sitting next to us. Sorry about the miscommunication. They were late. I mean, by like 8 minutes. So we were in the show, and they arrived, and there was confusion about the seats. Brian, I give you a little bit of pats about having to on the fly figure out what was going on. So part of that's on them too. Don't be late to something like this. We dressed up. We buttoned up shirts for this event.
Oh, we were looking fly. Yeah, we got some photos. Maybe we'll post to the social medias. But yeah, in terms of the show itself, I think you even said it afterwards, Christian. When an orchestra starts, I have a physical reaction. This live music in this acoustic setting, it's just unbelievable. It's not something you can really replicate at home to a large degree. And you have people who are all at the top of their game in terms of professionally playing these instruments, a live choir. So all the music through and through was incredible. I think the visuals, I really appreciated seeing a lot of the fighting and the character designs. I did think one of the main characters, because the presentation was named Big Shot rather than his actual name, because there's no audio to any of this. So I didn't know the characters' names. They didn't go out of their way to walk you through the story, the plot,
there were no
of what's happening. No subtitles either. But I did really enjoy seeing all of the designs of the bosses and the enemies that you fight. I thought it was really cool going through and seeing kind of the totality of the game. In terms of consistency, it was a little strange. Some of the songs, I don't want to trample on you, Christian, but something you had mentioned was how in the game, things will repeat and adapt to what's happening in the game. Here, all of the songs were self-contained, so it felt a little abrupt hopping between them at times. There wasn't really smooth transitions necessarily between the songs. Individually, they were really great, but in terms of it didn't feel like there was a cohesive story being told through the music. Outside of what was being shown on screen. And
to that point, the way in which they were presenting the music and the gameplay was not linear.
Right.
They were jumping around in time in the game.
I think it started.
It was linear at the very beginning.
Degree, right?
Yeah, to kind of place us in the context of the game. They did start with the beginning. But after that, it was all over the place.
Yeah, but the music itself was incredible. I think sometimes because of the footage that they chose to show, the visuals may have taken away from the music a little bit. I think we could have done less of people sliding down ladders. It seemed like there was 10 shots of people literally just sliding down ladders.
Brian,
to be fair,
I'm
that's
so
in the game a lot.
You again, Brian, but you just reminded me while we were sitting in the theater and they were playing those sequences, I was like, oh, there's a lot of like industrial environments in this game. Like
Yes.
a lot of these Mako reactors look identical. And it's something I never pieced together before because there's so much space in between those levels. You never see them juxtaposed right next to one another.
Right.
But that was also a revelation that I had, even having played the game for so many years. It was just like, oh man, a lot of these levels are really samey looking.
No, a part of it is the way the combat is. You know, it's so big and over the top, and you fly everywhere, and you're running across the battlefield. That no, this is something I think I pointed out in our review, which is some of these environments you get out and you're like, oh, I'm about to fight a boss here because it's just so open and barren. And when you have all this beautiful music playing and it's cutting to gameplay in which they're in one of these things, it really sticks out. Like, that is a very large open plot of environment that they're in with nothing. It's like four
Strange
corners.
how this room is shaped like an arena.
Yeah. Strange how there's a bunch of arenas in here.
So, last couple things. I really appreciated having listened to you guys talk about this game, seeing the Hell House, the notorious Hell House level. I turned to Chris and you were just like having flashbacks, trauma flashbacks from this thing. But seeing that was really cool. And hearing from some of the creators of the music themselves, seeing some of them interlude between the songs, they would come out and talk. So I did appreciate that as well. On
video, to be clear. It's all like piped in.
Yes.
But you get some of the rearrangers, people that like rearranged and stuff, and then you get who apparently is in good health now, which is amazing to hear. But you get Nobuo Uematsu at one point, which is really amazing to get to hear from the composer, and that's super cool.
Oh, I had one other moment that I wanted to shout out. This could be my last thing. Something that I actually recognized from having played previous games. They ended one of the songs with the wrap-up battle
Victory
theme.
fanfare.
The fanfare.
Okay, the fanfare, and that one immediately, I was like, my heart just like, oh, I know this music. That was great.
Yeah, part of me likes the extended fanfare. We're gonna bum bum bum, but you know, you only get so much. There's a lot of Final Fantasy VII music. Very cool, Brian. Glad you enjoyed the event. It's always good that like even my fiance, who again is more unfamiliar with all this than anything else, was like, the music was beautiful. Like afterwards, she was telling her dad about it. And she's like, oh, the music was gorgeous. Like she's like, it was after some dumb video game, which is pretty stupid. But she's like, the music was amazing, which indeed,
that's
I
great.
think we can all agree that it was. Chris, what was your overall impressions of the evening?
So as I'd mentioned, and as Christian had mentioned about Erica, you know, as a child, I would go to our local performing arts center every so often, at least during the holidays, to like see live performances. So I was kind of accustomed to this setting, but it's been a really long time since I've gotten to see live music performed like this. Probably maybe like over 20 years at this point. So it's been fairly long. But my main takeaway is, you know, having listened to these songs since I was a teenager and getting to hear them remixed and remade for Final Fantasy VII Remake, there's a ton of nostalgia that is imbued within all of this music for me. But getting to see them perform live from so many talented people, and there's something mystical about watching so many people perform this music live, all in collaboration with one another, and producing seemingly a perfect track. It really resonated with me and kind of spoke to my spirit. It's just so magical getting to see live humans perform at this level. You know, just all in synchronicity with one another. There's a synergy about it. It just really, that's the best way I could describe it, is kind of a magical spiritual experience, because these people are just so incredibly talented. You know, it's really miraculous to behold. So if you've never experienced something like this, I highly, highly recommend doing so. You know,
Nobuo
regardless
Uematsu
of whether you were in
hates
art
violinist and cellist.
I'm sorry, Christian, what were you saying?
I said Nobuo Uematsu, the composer, clearly hates violinist and cellist with a passion. Just wants to give them carpal tunnel immediately.
It's making them work for sure.
Yeah, for real. But yeah, it really was an amazing experience. I actually agree with Brian that I think while I appreciate that the video game imagery was meant to kind of ground us contextually in where the songs were taking place within the game, sometimes it was kind of distracting. You know, outside of playing cutscenes, which are like very meticulously crafted, they don't have a lot of quirks to them. We did actually get some gameplay, and there were a couple moments where I was like, oh, I remember how buggy this fucking game was. There was one scene where like this beautiful song is playing. It may have been like Aerith's theme or something. And they're at this, Aerith and Cloud are at this school, and we have all these children running around. They're all NPCs, and you just see a kid kicking a chair because the chair is in his walking path. And you're just like, all right, this is a video game. I forgot. And that's a really weird and distracting glitch.
It's weird.
Why did they use that game footage?
It's like they were padding it out, and they're just like, quick, Charles, run through the game real quick. And then they just took footage seemingly like pre-programmed. You know, your phone sometimes is like, we're gonna make you a photo thing, and sometimes it's like 80% good, and then you're like, that's a clip of like my toe when I forgot I was recording. Like that's
a weird choice.
Some of that happening where you're like, why is this, like, I'm hearing this beautiful arrangement played almost to perfection, and yeah, there's a kid kicking a chair, and there's like 8, digits. That was it kept in the UI that like digits fly through.
Yeah, very strange. A lot of, you could see the damage being taken by enemies on the screen.
Not a particularly like good player either. Like they would have combat, and you'd be like, he's just smashing square. You know, they didn't show a lot of special moves, so there was a level of like.
I was curious about that. Yeah, it did seem like kind of simplistic action.
It wasn't like impressive Let's Plays of like, oh, this person's really good at Final Fantasy VII. Which was also baffling. Anyway, Chris, I'm sorry.
But yeah, it was pretty distracting. Obviously, some of the standout songs for me were, Those Who Fight, the battle theme, like Brian mentioned. That is a classic Final Fantasy VII song. So it was very exciting to hear that played live. Hearing the fanfare as well, as Brian mentioned, super cool to hear that live. We got to the end of the show. Well, we got to the credits of the concert, and they had still not played One Wing Angel. And as we're clapping for the entire orchestra, I turned to Christian and I was like, that was excellent, but strange that they didn't play One Wing Angel. What I told Christian, I believe, is one of the most iconic video game songs of all time. And of course, they came in with an encore for One Wing Angel, and that was just fucking amazing.
And they turned the whole
they changed the lighting to red, which really suits the motif of the song. It was a really fun experience and spiritual experience, I guess.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Very cool. As soon as the orchestra started playing, I had literal goosebumps. Like, as soon as because I haven't heard a live orchestra, and obviously being very familiar, the prelude is absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I do think in the first couple songs that the visuals are working really well, and they really nail it for the prelude, because they even play like the old, as they do kind of the medley.
They play the title screen.
That's great too. But even before that, they're playing a medley of all the themes, because they kind of warm you up with all the motifs of what's to come, and they're showing old gameplay footage, and it just nostalgia, beautiful, like, and you're seeing all this goofy gameplay footage, but it's cute because it's all, it clearly just looks bad, so it's not trying to be anything that it's not. When they get to
so just to be clear, it's showing the original footage from
1997,
intercutting with the remake,
and you get titles saying like, oh, 1997 released, and all this other stuff. It's great. And then you get in the prelude, and we're just watching the opening of the game like happen.
I'm getting chills just you talking about it.
Even the when the title string, the and the Final Fantasy VII remake pops up, and it's perfectly timed. Like they have tech. The composer I saw has like what probably I don't know which software it is specifically, but
some metronome going there.
Yeah, it's a metronome that times it, and they're able to like play the video and time it perfectly, and it's. And the first chair, by the way, I was crushing, so even next to my fiance. I love my life. Crushing pretty hard on the first chair violinist, I gotta say. And so was my fiance. We were both like, she's an impressive person. So, Orlando Philharmonic first chair violinist. I'm taken. And
we've been looking at you across the opera house, and we like your vibe.
Yeah, we like what you're bringing to the table. It was also cool seeing all the musicians like into it, right? But like clearly, like watching all this, like literal chills. I just was transported. And then it continues to go. And yeah, you've already mentioned the visuals are just like, at some points they're okay, but what ends up happening is they theme, like they'll play like, oh, and now we're going to go into Tifa's theme. And Tifa has this sweet, and one of the only flubs that I notably heard, other than some timing stuff, because this music's very difficult, and I want to say the Orlando Philharmonic, with probably a very tight schedule to put this together, did an amazing, incredible job. Like, there's no qualms here. There was one sour note in Tifa's theme, which starts with this beautiful piano arrangement. There's one sour arrangement. Chris, you actually physically moved when you heard it. Like, I saw you jerk because it was like, out of all the perfections, one little, that wasn't right.
What was that?
And I'm not even sure you knew it was a bad note. Your body knew it was a bad note. But other than that, everything was, other than some weird timing issues. But as we're playing that, you know, it's Tifa in the bar and all this other stuff that players are very familiar with, and it's very fitting with the music. But what happens in a lot of these, like, character theme parts is what they would do is start to show montages. And Tifa's like a badass, but there's no point in the game where she's like kicking ass. And then they're like, let's play that sweet Tifa's theme while she's kicking ass. And they would show her kicking ass with the sweet Tifa theme. And I'm like, this is just off. And so definitely like the most disappointing thing about the night overall is not only is there like gameplay that's weird and like buggy and stuff, but just like the fact that like the music matches up really nicely sometimes, and then sometimes it just doesn't. And I don't think this is anything that says don't go see this. It's a part of the overall production that isn't as clean as how well everything else is being executed. And what I'd say is just watch the performers, because they're shredding the shit out of all their instruments, and they're entertaining to watch in their own, and see how all the orchestration, if you've never seen, like, a lot of people get a lot more appreciation for seeing orchestras live because you get to see how many people, how many different parts. Like, even for me, like, I have a pretty good ear for this stuff, but I would say like a lot of lesser themes throughout, like a lot of lesser parts of the score, and they're mostly playing everything you're familiar with, but a lot of parts that I'm like, you know, for instance, you know, Shinra's theme, which I think is really good, but being able to see some of the intricate finger work as well as parts of that I didn't know existed come alive and see it actually act live, like that's where the real money's at. And that's such a special experience that you just don't get, where you're like, oh my goodness, actually like all these cellos are quietly playing this right now, and you get to see the different techniques they have to use. And some of these songs just are like, okay, you're going staccato, full staccato, now you're just making, you know, runs, and now you're slowly strumming, and now you're staccato again. And it's insane to see this happen. But overall, like, really excellent thing. Some people were cosplayed, not as much as I was actually thinking, but definitely in like one of the first
those
rows.
that were cosplayed very well.
Yeah, there were some awesome ones.
It made me happy that, like, you know, it was, I didn't want it to be like going to an anime convention, you know, where like everybody was cosplayed to varying degrees. Like, I'm grateful that those that chose to cosplay, God, the costumes were very good. So at least there's that.
There was,
you
a
know,
Rufus
there was nobody
there
walking around in a cardboard box.
The Rufus present was Rufusing up the entire establishment.
He was.
But
very much in character.
Very much a character. Did a bow. That was really fun. It was fun to see all that stuff. It was just such a great night. And yeah, the Dr. Phillips Center in Orlando, great venue. Great. The sound was really great. Some highlights, obviously, Let the Battles Begin into the Victory Fanfare. Like, that song just gets me pumped. I'll play that stuff just for fun. It's great. But even like the Turks theme, stuff that like didn't stick out a whole lot, is great. Before Flowers Blooming in the Church, I do want to mention there was a proposal that they had orchestrated, which was someone got engaged the night we went. It was super sweet. But even like Mako Reactor 1, which is like, yeah, I know that theme and it fits the mood of the game, and while you're playing the game it works really well, but like seeing it live, still very good. I said Shinra's theme. The most surprising thing, and obviously One Winged Angel, everybody it's not my favorite thing in this entire lineup, but I know a lot of people love it. It was great to see. They crushed it. Like, they really, because they had just got the encore of everybody standing and cheering, they were pumped to just bolt this one out. So there's a lot of great energy in that. That made it worse. Hollow, which is like you know, and there's the intro. This is actually the one before the composer comes out and talks about it. And
it's the new song for Remake specifically.
Yeah, and there's, you know,
lyrics to it.
It's a Japanese pop song. Think very much like if you added an orchestra to anime opening, maybe a little more bravado, like a little slower, but it's a power ballad nonetheless. And this is the kind of stuff that never works for me in these Japanese animes and games and stuff, where it's always just like, oh, they're obviously fans of the genre, but coming from kind of like, if you listen to my stuff, I'm like from the punk emo rock genre, and so this is like I'm into like all the all the great roots of this stuff, and this stuff always seems just like it's having fun. People that are fans of the genre, but always just kind of sounding samey. And I gotta say, the vocal performer that they had come on, which I don't remember his name, I'm so sorry, because it's gonna be different whenever you see it. But the one we had in Orlando, halfway through it, man, won me over. And even though the lyrics are clearly written by a Japanese band and then translated right in English, and you kind of worked on from that angle, which is just always a hard bridge to cross. I'm not saying it's impossible, but language is tough.
I think they did really well.
No, he Chris Cornell style, like he blew the roof off that place and made me believe in this idea that it could work again. And with the orchestra behind him, it was excellent. It was really good. I was so worried. I was like, oh no, vocalist, this is going to be, because I've heard this type of music before. I've heard this song before, and I wasn't particularly impressed. The live rendition of it with all the orchestration and just an excellent vocal performance. I hope it's as good if you go see this in your town. This was a highlight for me.
Keeping with the theme of our month, James Bond month, I did turn to Christian in the middle of the Hollow performance. Christian just called out Chris Cornell, and I was like, could Hollow be a Bond song? Because it sounded so much like it could be a potential Bond song in that moment. I never thought of it like that before, but maybe it's just because we have Bond on the brain. But very funny. Maybe
for like a Japanese inspired James Bond that they like make. Like I could see that for sure. Like Cowboy Bebop meets James Bond.
Yeah.
But that was a surprisingly enjoyable.
Tune. He came out after there was already a full choir on stage that had been performing.
Oh, that's another thing.
The show on top of all of the other musicians. So he had a lot to outshine, and he came out and killed it.
Yeah.
I was just trying to look up his name and I couldn't find it, but hopefully we could put it in the show notes or something.
Yeah. Pitch perfect. It was really excellent. Everybody's great. I also want to shout out the conductor, who is a lot of what makes this work really well, which is Arnie Roth, also known as Arnold Roth. And he does a lot of these video game concerts. Like he seems to be a go-to person for this kind of stuff. He actually, his biggest credit for composing is the Barbie as Rapunzel and a bunch of Barbie video game stuff, which is really interesting. But he's won an Emmy for it, for his original song Shine from the Barbie in the 12 Dancing Princesses. So very interesting, but he also does a lot of these video game tours. He did Play a Video Game Symphony, which is a collection. So obviously this is kind of his wheelhouse of translating these and being able to bring it to different towns. So I'm interested to hear and see the reviews. I read a review. There's a pretty popular review of when they did this in London, like right before this tour kicked off. So it's gonna vary based on like, but it's gonna vary based on like the performance and stuff, because it is different orchestras. It's not a traveling orchestra. Like that would be insanely expensive to do. It's already a pretty insanely expensive endeavor to do this as our ticket price would indicate. But I just want to shout him out. He brought a lot of energy. He seemed a little more nervous. Like there was some words flubbed, and there was part of it that was like, do you even like know about video games, man? Because I think he said Final Fantasy or something like that. But he was, I think he was nervous.
He was pretty good most of the time. Yeah. I think that was just him stumbling over his words in that one moment.
He had a couple of misspeaks, which is hard. Like I do a podcast, I say a lot. I misspeak my words. I'm not saying it's easy. So I want to be very clear, but there was a level of like, I think it plays to the show in general, which there's just a little bit of like this polished thing that was missing from it being like a holistic piece, down from the visuals. Not like Arnie Roth was a very likable person and he did a really great job, but there was a lack of polish, not in the music. The music was the most polished thing, which is the most important thing for something like this. So for that, very good.
Look, Christian, we all love Final Fantasy cheesecake. And I'm just happy you guys are here. Thank you for showing out.
Yeah, he would announce it, and there was a level of conviction of he'd be like, and we're gonna go into the arsenal. Like, it was like he was reading it for the first time in some cases, and I don't think that's the case, but there was this level of disconnect from him and maybe the music. But, you know, for what it was, I was very happy. For the price that we paid for admission, which I was not expecting you both to like repay me, because I bought these in like, we just have to experience this. It makes no sense financially for us to do this.
He demanded it months ago.
I did not. I just made the call. But for like what the cost is, do you think this is a good value proposition? You know, and does it matter whether or not you're familiar with the music, would you say?
I think we were very fortunate to procure these specific seats. And I think in terms of what we paid for them, yeah, I think the value's there. Do I think that you could experience this show from anywhere in the auditorium, regardless of how much you paid for the seats? I do. But it was still, you know, a fantastic experience based on where we were sitting in the pit. But I think you would get as much out of it regardless of where you were sitting in the auditorium. That's just my personal opinion, though. I know audio shifts and changes based on where you're located, so that also added, you know, to the quality of the seats that we were sitting in. But
being so close to the strings was really nice. There was a part of perspective that I would have loved to see, maybe some more of the brass section, because the brass is louder, so they put them in the back, and we were so close that we were getting the strings. But from a sound perspective, the brass is so loud that, I mean, you could literally hear pieces of the what's the horsehair strummer called? I forget. I even like played violin for a little bit, and I can't remember the bow.
The bow. You
would hear the bow sometimes clack against, you know, and being able to hear that so close is like there's such a tactile nature to it. It felt so alive. It was great. So for that, it was worth it audio wise. I think we were in the sweet spot. But I would have loved to seen the performers a little more.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. I mean, the seats, the value is there just in sound quality, visibility. But yeah, I think to see an orchestra perform on this level, the value's there. Even if there are some inadequacies to the visual part of the performance, it's just unbelievable to see professionals do their job this well. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this.
Yeah, and also seeing... you know, it reminded me, seeing the gameplay and all that, in summation of my final thoughts, reminding me that part of why I love like Zelda and Final Fantasy, despite some of the goofiness of how some of the stuff is put together, Japanese composers historically have just been writing incredibly beautiful music for so long. And I love some of even the stuff in their like pop genres and stuff, but like the early Nintendo video game stuff like really was like, you can write genuinely fantastic transportative things that explain character and space in a way that I think Western audiences are just starting to get in the last like 15 years. But for all the composers that have worked with like Nintendo and even like Sega and other Japanese developers, like they have just been like getting so much talent in this area, and Final Fantasy Remake is kind of the crown jewel. And despite, I think it's funny because the things that I have issue with are similar things that I had issue with in the video game, but what's so cool is like this is like what drew me to the emotion of these characters. It's absolutely insane what's happening on screen. It's so ridiculous. It's outlandishly fantastical, but the music is so emotional and so grounded to what's happening in the terror and the happiness and the love. Like it's so connected that this is what I love most about these games, and specifically this game, that it was just such an enjoyable experience. And
I'm so happy we got to experience it
me
together.
Too.
We were holding hands the whole time.
If you have the opportunity, we highly recommend it, regardless of where you're sitting.
Oh, there's not get your chocolate covered peanuts though.
No, they did run out of food.
Brian and I never told Erica this, but we tried to get her snacks in the middle of the show, and they did not sell food.
They sold out of them. They had some, but they sold out very quickly. Yeah.
Okay.
They also sold out of the like double vinyl set that I was hoping to get. That merch line, very long, very long.
Oh, I couldn't imagine standing in it.
I don't think those people saw the show. There is also
They have the vinyl.
the last shout out I'll give.
They came in late, and I sent them to the end of the row.
I know we're running long. The last shout out and thing I'll say is there's a lot of great pieces from this that are very like rock heavy that aren't in the show, which is a little disappointing, but it makes sense. And I was missing that electric rhythm guitar from Let the Battles Begin. So, you know, it's different in a lot of ways, but a lot of the orchestral beauty's there. There's a pop song called Stand Up that they do a orchestral revision of.
They did.
That was, I'll leave it at very interesting. Parts of it working, parts of it not so much.
It's a solid attempt.
And it's even
moment where the visuals matched up pretty well, I'll say.
They did.
They did. And that, you know, I don't know if I did. I still don't know if that player or I did good on that dance sequence, because the fail state and when you're doing good, not very clear. It's like a DDR button mash thing.
Right. Yeah.
I was very confused with functionally how it was being played at that point. But
I was too, and I played the game. Was happy to see the squat competition, though, highlighted. So it was cool for players to see some of that stuff. So that is the Final Fantasy VII Remake Orchestral Tour. Boys, thank you for doing this. Real quick for the YouTube watchers, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Chris Conkling.
And you can find me at True Pop-O-Holic.
And you can find my band at Midnight Satire, definitely influenced by video game music. There's some correlation there. Not same level playing field, but it's there. Yeah, listen to it. Stream it. Positive NDA streaming now. Let me know what you think. There's more of an orchestra than there normally is. There's a whole brass section. Some of these tracks. So check it out. Very cool. Follow the link in the show notes. Subscribe. Listen to the audio feed if you like our takes on this. We are covering a whole bunch of stuff currently, wrapping up our Bond month. A lot of cool things happening there. Boys, thanks for doing this. And YouTube watchers, adios.